Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Daily Current Affairs Analysis of Shankar IAS Academy. Today, we are going to discuss the current affairs of 22nd of November 2025. Before going into the topic, do not forget to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any content and current affairs related to UPSC examination. Like the video, comment if you have any doubts, and share this video to your friends. What are the topics we are going to discuss today? We are going to discuss about polluted groundwater, where it has happened, what is called as polluted groundwater, and what are the causes, everything we'll discuss. Then we are going to talk about TB eradication, what are the steps taken by the entire world and what we are doing regarding the same. And third one is State of World's Children Report of 2025. So this is very important for both in terms of UPSC and when we discuss about what is happening in the world. State of World's Children Report is very important to understand this. And UPSC has been asking regarding mental health, specifically related to child mental health, children's mental health, and this topic would help you to understand that. Next is about Global South Leadership Arc G20. The concept of Global South, few days before I discussed why this term Global South is related to every topics we study in the UPSC examination, and that we will discuss, and what India is striving to do under this concept of Global South Leadership Arc. Next is prelims focus. We will be discussing certain topics which specifically focuses on preliminary examination, and we'll see what are those. The first topic we are going to discuss is about the hidden cost of polluted groundwater. We know how the surface water gets polluted, but how does the groundwater get polluted? Now, when we talk about the hidden cost, what are we talking about the hidden cost? Because we all know about the economic cost, but what about the social cost? What about the environmental cost? That is what we are going to discuss here. According to Annual Groundwater Quality Report of 2024, nearly 20% of groundwater samples across 440 plus districts show contamination above the permissible limits. So, what are the major contaminants? Uranium, fluoride, arsenic, nitrate. These are the major contaminants. Arsenic is one of the major important concept, a heavy metal which is polluting the groundwater. India's groundwater dependence, that is almost 600 million people depend on groundwater for drinking. And this is very important because it accounts what is the maximum utilization. Who utilizes the maximum? It is the 65% is going for irrigation. This statement is given by the Central Groundwater Board. So the total groundwater, among that 65% is used for irrigation alone. There was a prelims question regarding that. That question stated that more than 25% of groundwater is utilized by India alone. The world's groundwater is utilized by India alone for drinking water and sanitation. That was the statement. But we are utilizing for irrigation. That is something we should keep it in the mind. Major contaminants, we have uranium. We know it is radioactive, especially in Punjab. 1/3 of samples are exceeding limits. This causes kidney damage. Next is fluoride. This is endemic in Rajasthan, Gujarat, Telangana and Odisha. This causes dental and skeletal fluorosis. So this will weaken our bone system. So it will lead to further issues. Arsenic, this is severe in Bihar, West Bengal, Assam. It causes skin lesions, cancer, cognitive impairment in children. Arsenic was asked once in the prelims also. I have taken the question for you for the prelims related to groundwater contamination. We will discuss that at the last. Next is nitrate. See, nitrate we know where does it come from? Majorly fertilizers and sewage. This is something you should know because we are using nitrogen NPK fertilizers. So when the runoff is taking place, this goes and mixes up with the surface water. But what if it is leaching? What if it is going to the groundwater? That is why nitrate can be found in the groundwater. This causes hemoglobin issues, blue baby syndrome. This disease is called as methemoglobinemia, that is nitrogen present in the blood. And why the baby is called as blue baby is when the nitrogen level is higher in the blood, the baby's blood looks blue in color. Like when you look at the baby, it looks blue in color. That is why it is called as blue baby syndrome. Sectoral impacts, public health. What are the impacts with respect to public health? Children under 5 are at risk, specifically diarrheal diseases, High expenditure on treatment, this is what I'm talking about. Health cost, the hidden costs. What are the hidden costs? Health cost, this is the social cost. High expenditure on treatment, this pushes the family into debt, the vicious cycle of poverty. So when a family is poor, they can't afford treatment. So when they are falling sick, so they have to spend their money for treatment, and also they cannot go to work. So what happens? They again fall into poverty. So this is what you call it as vicious cycle of poverty. There is a lesson in 9th standard economics NCERT as poverty elevation. You can see this particular concept, vicious cycle of poverty, in that particular lesson. Next is social inequality. Wealthier households can afford, like we have RO systems today, bottled water. But what about the poor households below poverty line? So the causes are from the richer households, but the effects are faced by the poor households. This widens the inequality, remain exposed and perpetuates the poverty cycle, again falling into vicious cycle of poverty. Agriculture, soil degradation affects nearly 30% of India's land. Being 65% of groundwater utilized for irrigation, what if we are using the polluted water? What happens? That is what we are seeing here. 30% of land has been degraded by this polluted water. Polluted groundwater reduces the crop yields and also the soil productivity, degradation of soil. Water pollution leading to land pollution. There is a link here. Heavy metals accumulate in crops, leading to bioaccumulation and biomagnification, and in turn, it will cause an issue in terms of human and animal health also. So, export rejections risk to India's almost 50 billion US dollars of agricultural value. So, this is what we mean by hidden cost. So, from the outside, it doesn't look like it is going to affect the export. How groundwater pollution is going to affect the export? It will disqualify our export goods. Noticing that you have accumulated, bioaccumulated heavy metal will be a very major issue for our trade. Causes of the crisis: over extraction of groundwater. Punjab, we know whenever we see Punjab, you should remember green revolution. One of the major criteria of green revolution is intensive irrigation. Yes, so Punjab's irrigation exceeds almost 1.5 times the sustainable limit. 1.5 times. Industrial effluents and untreated sewage are another major example. Chemical fertilizers used, again, chemical inputs, a part of green revolution. Lack of real-time monitoring and weak enforcement, these are the major issues. We do have law. We do have law regarding maintaining the groundwater quality. We'll discuss what are the governance related to it, what are the laws related to that. But is it implemented? Is it enforced? That is the question here. Additional information you should know, you might get question regarding this. Groundwater governance in India is primarily regulated by Environmental Protection Act of 1986, Water Prevention and Control of Pollution Act of 1974, Groundwater Sustainable Management Act. This is implemented in states. So it is a state-wise legislation. Next is we have Central Groundwater Board. This monitors the groundwater quality nationally. A national aquifer mapping and management program. So this maps and manages aquifers, the recharges. So that is also another major institution you should know. So two questions we have taken. One is from UPSC 2013 PYQ. Which of the following can be found as pollutants in the drinking water in some parts of India? Arsenic, sorbitol, fluoride, formaldehyde and uranium. And we saw the major, four major. We saw arsenic, fluoride, uranium, and also we saw nitrate, but nitrate is not here. So answer is 1, 3 and 5 only: arsenic, fluoride and uranium. Next question is, which of the following is or are the possible consequences of heavy sand mining in the river beds? So this question you have to have an imagination in your mind. So you are mining the sand, river sand, which means it is the next layers are going to get exposed. So what might happen? It will increase the salinity in the river, because under the sand salts will be present, and the salts exposed to the running water will get dissolved in the water, increasing the salinity of water. Pollution of groundwater might take place and lowering of water table. These two will take place. But decreased, no, it will increase the salinity. So answer is 2 and 3 only is the right answer. The next topic we are going to discuss is about TB eradication, India's innovation in TB diagnostics and their global impact. So, this is what we are going to discuss today about this TB eradication. Redefining the narrative of TB eradication worldwide. This year's Kochon Prize highlights how India is creating scalable solutions that can transform global health equity. So, talking about this TB, so what are the causes of TB and what is its impact and what is the role in terms of India making it better in terms of eradicating TB. So, TB diagnosis landscape. So, earlier TB diagnosis relied on sputum smear microscopy, which is of low sensitivity, because sputum is nothing but it is the mucus secretion that is done in our nasal cavity during any form of infection, and by analyzing that under microscope, we would be finding out if it is a result of TB. Next is culture test, which is slow and weak. Culture test is basically they'll take a sample and they'll try to grow it in the laboratory. So they'll see the multiplication and they'll see what kind of organism is present in that, and that is what is culture test. Shift to rapid molecular diagnostics has transformed this case detection, because when it comes to TB, earlier the detection is, better the treatment is. And you also should remember, when it comes to TB treatment, the drug resistant TB is one of the major issue, because we have multi drug resistance TB and also extensively drug resistant TB. So these are the major issues, because XDR TB is like very tough to treat. So that is why earlier detection, better the treatment is, better the solution is also. India's molecular diagnostic breakthrough. So this is TrueTan platform made in India. So this is portable, battery operated PCR machine. It detects TB plus rifampicin resistance in less than 1 hour, because rifampicin is one of the antibiotics given to treat TB, because TB is caused by tuberculosis, Mycobacterium tuberculosis, that is the bacteria's name. So what caused TB is a bacteria, it is a bacterial infection. It is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So this bacteria can be detected, and that too the drug resistance variant also can be detected in less than 1 hour. So World Health Organization has approved this in 2020 for TB diagnosis, and detection of that is rifampicin resistant TB has been confirmed from the World Health Organization TB report in 2024. So this enables point of care testing in low resource area, because this is very important. Who is getting affected by TB the most, and where are the facilities available? So there is a gap between these two: geographical, financial gaps, awareness gaps. There are so many types of gaps in between these two, where we have the treatment and where we have the people who are getting affected by this. Because of this portable testing machine, so this is taking the test accessible to the people. Maybe it is a geographical distance or financial distance. These two are here filled up by this particular breakthrough. Global impact. So in Nigeria, RRTB detection nearly doubled after this particular integration, after this particular technology has been integrated in Nigeria. It has been doubled, detection has been doubled. So children, stool based TrueNut testing addresses difficulty of sputum collection, because in children, asking them to give the sputum is not easy. For children, you have to make them understand. Sometimes it is very painful for them. So here stool based testing is even more better in terms of children. So Africa trial, Mozambique, Tanzania, so on-site testing and rapid result communication has improved treatment initiation within 7 days. So from the finding, within the 7 days the treatment is initiated. As I told you, time is of essence at these cases of infection, specifically when it comes to the communicable diseases. Time is very important factor. So widely deployed across sub-Saharan Africa, refugee camps in Eastern Europe and mobile clinics. India's national TB elimination program, very important. This is a potential question. Why I am telling it to be a potential question is because we aim to eliminate TB by 2025. That is our national target. Even though the World Health Organization's target is 2030, Our target is 2025, which is this year, which means it is a potential question that can be asked in the coming prelims, that is May 2026. So please keep this in mind. So rapid adoption of point of care molecular system under this NTEP, National TB Elimination Program. Thousands of units have been installed, shorter diagnostic to treatment time. So this is improving the case management, and also India being aiming to eliminate TB by 2025. That is something we should keep it in the mind. What is the Scotchon Prize 2024 to 25? It's awarded to Malbio Diagnostics, Goa, for this particular technology. So earlier winners in India regarding the Scotchon Prize, is there anyone else? Yes, Dr. L.S. Chauhan and ICMR. These two awards have been given earlier. So significance highlights India's role in affordable global health innovation. India is known for this. India is a global leader in terms of treatment. Medical tourism is very famous. India is a medical tourist destination because here treatment is affordable and also of quality. It's not because cheap people come here, it is of good quality, at the same time it is affordable. Public health is taken seriously in our country, and that too the states, the southern states specifically, when you take, are even more good in terms of the quality. Tamil Nadu, Kerala, the mortality rates are very less when we look at these particular states. Because when you talk about development, you talk about human development index, life expectancy is a very important criteria among three criteria of human development index, whereas literacy rate, per capita income and the life expectancy, and India is doing better in this because of affordable and quality healthcare. We'll discuss a prelims question regarding this. TrueNat, recently seen in news, is related to which of the following? It is a point of care molecular diagnostic platform for tuberculosis. So answer would be B is the right answer for this question. One of the most important topic we are going to discuss today is State of World's Children Report 2025. So what happens in the future that cannot be controlled, but if India has to be good in the future, we should take care of our children. So this particular topic speaks about what is multi-dimensional poverty index and how it affects the children. So 400 million children globally are deprived in at least two critical areas. This is the statement given by UNICEF. So we'll see what is this. So what is the key global findings of UNICEF? So UNICEF's State of World Children 2025 Ending Child Poverty reports that 400 million children, approximately 20% of children in low and middle income countries, are deprived in at least two essential areas of well-being. There are essential areas of well-being being health, nutrition, education, sanitation, housing. There are certain basic well-beings. But what UNICEF is stating is that among the world's total population of children, about 20% are deprived of at least two. I'm not speaking about the most. At least two well-beings they are not given. And imagine there are few children who don't get any of these basic needs. Multidimensional deprivation is a more severe indicator than the income poverty. Because poverty, if it is seen only in the economical aspect, it speaks about the income. But along with this poverty, there are other deprivations come. So that is what we call it as multi-dimensional poverty. So this reflects deficits in child rights and essential services. Every child is entitled to its rights, because one thing about children are innocence. They never asked to come to this world. If they are coming to this world, it is our obligation to take care of them. So in that aspect, children's right, because they don't have their own voice, we have to talk for them. And in that case, India's specific insights. What are those India specific insights? India has approximately 460 million children according to UNICEF in 2025. And India is on track to meet the Sustainable Development Goals target of 1.2, where reducing multidimensional poverty at least half by 2030. And Niti Aayog is also giving some insights towards. So regarding this National Multidimensional Poverty Index, 248 million people has escaped multidimensional poverty index in India from 2013 to 14 to 2022 to 23, the last decade they are talking about. So India's multidimensional poverty index fell from 29.2% of the population to 11.3%. It has reduced to almost 50%. So flagship schemes contributing to the improvement: Poshan Abhiyan, Jal Jeevan Mission, PM Garib Kalyan Anna Yojana, Swachh Bharat Mission, Ayushman Bharat, Samagra Shiksha. So you talk about the basic well-beings and now try to match them with the schemes. Poshan Abhiyan takes care of nutrition. Jal Jeevan Mission takes care of sanitation, drinking and sanitation. Garib Kalyan, again nutrition, food security. Swachh Bharat Mission, sanitation. Samagra Shiksha, education and also nutritional aspects. Ayushman Bharat, health. So the basic well-being which we are discussing that the children are deprived of, these flagship schemes are offering them to the children of our country. UNICEF policy recommendation. What is UNICEF recommending for the children? Make child poverty reduction a national priority with rights-based budgeting. So budgeting itself should have this in mind. Expand inclusive social protection, cash transfers, food security and healthcare access. Ensure equitable access to nutrition. Equitable, they are not talking about equal access. Equitable access to the nutrition. Early childhood care, education, sanitation and safe housing. So talking about child rights, where do we discuss children in our constitution? We discuss about children in fundamental rights, DPSP and also fundamental duties. The education and well-being of children are spoken in these three aspects in the constitution. Please do keep it in the mind. Promote decent work, economic security for caregivers, essential for child well-being. Now talking about the fundamental rights, Article 21A regarding right to education. In DPSP it speaks about how we should take care of our children from the age of 1 to 6. In fundamental duties it speaks about how we should care the children from 1 to 18 years of 18 years. So 86th Amendment Act, which is called as the Education Amendments, has made changes in all these three. That is why it is called as the Education Amendment. Additional facts: multidimensional poverty index uses 3 dimensions: health, education, standard of living. So now you can try it with this Human Development Index. Again it is very similar, where they speak about per capita income, life expectancy and literacy rate. So now health, education, standard of living. World's Children's Day, 20th November, UN adoption of Declaration of the Rights of Child in 1959. So that is the World's Children Day. So now we will see a question, prelims question. State of World's Children report, often seen in the news, is published by UNICEF. So that is what this current affairs is about. So it is UNICEF. And we are discussing now today's mains topic, one of the most potential topics for this prelims and mains and even in the interview. So G20 Global South Leadership Arc. So what is this? So G20 from India to Brazil to South Africa, a global South arc that must be sustained. So what is this term Global South? This started 3 years ago, the term Global South. So when we say Global South, as we already discussed, it is not just geographically south, but also in terms of development, in terms of facing climate change related risk and also availability of critical minerals. The Global South is gaining more importance today in the world, because Global North is developed already, they have done enough. But who is facing all the consequences? The Global South. So we will see about this. What is a Global South? What is G20 and Global South having in relationship with? We will discuss. So the context: G20 Leaders Summit is taking place in Johannesburg, November 22 to 23, 2025. So first G20 summit that is happening on the African soil. The conclusion of a 3-year Global South leadership arc. India 2023 took place in Delhi, Brazil 2024 and South Africa in 2025. So a transition of presidency back to the G7 United States happening in 2026. Because G20 is very major, because the majority of trade, the developing nations are all in this particular institution. So they play a major role in terms of deciding what is the future world will look like. So this sequence has reshaped the G20 towards development first priorities rather than other issues. So key outcomes: African Union admitted as the permanent G20 member, correcting the representation imbalance. So this is very important. This year, an African nation is becoming the chairman, and African Union is a permanent G20 member now. Now it is getting balanced. Digital public infrastructure, Aadhaar like IDs, UPI style payments recognized as a global public good. Push for multilateral development bank, that is also one of the key outcomes, because it will have higher lending capacity and climate aligned mandates, because global south, here in terms of global south, if we are concentrating only on development, will that be sustainable? No, because the climate change issue is always there and we have to look into that also. So climate aligned mandates and also higher lending capacity are of need. The emphasis on inclusive growth, green development and debt sustainability are one of the major outcomes. Brazil's G20 presidency in 2024. So it deepened the distributional lens. So what happened? So hunger, inequality, governance reforms were all priorities, because the South is facing development issues. And these are one of the major criteria to reduce the inequality, to reduce hunger. These are very important for development. Launch of Global Alliance Against Hunger and Poverty, integration of Mercosur countries into deliberation, continued focus on debt distress, climate justice, energy transition financing, and Brazil anchored G20 legitimacy in real world developmental outcomes. So before this, before India, before Brazil, it was not balanced, but now the countries on the global south are asking for what they want. It is becoming real world developmental outcomes. That is what we are seeing in this particular arc. South Africa's G20 presidency, it is consolidation and institutionalization. It started in India, it is becoming deep rooted in Brazil, and now it is a consolidation time. Theme: solidarity, equality and sustainability. Core agenda areas. What are the core agenda areas? Debt vulnerability and restructuring delays has to be taken care of. African industrialization and value addition, because critical minerals, Africa holds critical minerals. Why do you think the global north cares? Because the global south have critical minerals as their leverage. So we have to use this leverage properly to get what we want. So food security and agricultural resilience, just energy transition tailored to African needs, because the tussle, the constant fight between the global south and north, the global north is blaming global south for the environmental issues, and who caused all these environmental issues in the first place? The global north. So who is controlling who? This is a very big geopolitical issue. But one solution is just a transition. We cannot stop all our activities, but we can transform them into green activities. And how that will happen? We need clean technologies. Clean technologies are costlier. And where will we get the money from? Who should pay now? The developed countries should give it to the developing nations. So just energy transition tailored to African needs, cross-border payments, disaster risk financing and technology access has to be done. So critical crossroads, will momentum continue? Because we are assuming that United States will be the president in terms of 2026. So they will gain the presidency. But it is very shocking that the Trump administration has signaled limited engagement, because they call South Africa's presidency as a disgrace. See how rude it is. So possible shift towards geopolitical risk, supply chain security and industrial competition might increase. Development first priorities might lose visibility. We all know how the Trump administration functions, and that is one major critical crossroad right now. So however, MDB reform aligns with US interest. Climate finance has geopolitical value, and DPA standard setting fits US tech strategy. So this is one something we can hope for. So outcome will depend on India, Brazil, South Africa, global south coordination. So this is very important, how global south is coordinating with each other. Are we standing on our terms strong? Because the developed nations will try to shake this coordination definitely, and are we going to stand still? That question will answer the other questions. The ability to embed reforms into institutional G20 norms, not presidency cycles. So broader significance, 2023 to 25 arc shows the G20 transition from a crisis management forum to addressing structural inequities, climate justice and inclusive global governance. It reversed the global south may seek alternative forums. If reversed, global south may seek alternative forums, BRICS plus AU-led platforms, etc. AU-led here means African Union, because G20 was very importantly an economic forum, financial stability related forum, but today we are using that stage to ask for other things also. So that is why, what if it is getting reversed? Do we have a backup plan? Yes. So if reversed, global south may seek alternative forums. So we will discuss a mains practice question on this. Critically examine how consecutive G20 presidencies of India, Brazil and South Africa have reshaped the forum's developmental agenda. Discuss the challenges in sustaining this global south momentum once leadership shifts back to developed countries. So what we discussed right now. So we have to talk about G20 presidencies of India, Brazil and South Africa with respect to the timeline. Then we will talk about what are the outcomes and what is the relationship between these three presidencies, and then what might happen in the future and what is the positives and negatives if US is taking over the presidency and what has to be done. So this is how you have to approach this question. Do not forget to give your answers in the comment section. We will give you our feedbacks. We have come to the final section of discussion today, prelims focus. The first topic is about Rani Lakshmi Bai. Prime Minister pays tribute to Rani Lakshmi Bai on her birth anniversary. So the original name, Manikarnika Tombe. So born on 19 November 1828 in Varanasi, Uttar Pradesh, and was married to Maharaja of Jhansi. That is why she was often mentioned as Jhansi Rani. The Maharaja of Jhansi is Gangadhar Rao. After she was called Lakshmi Bai. Rani Lakshmi Bai, Manikarnika Tombe, Jhansi Rani. So all these three mentions about one person. Her son Damodan Rao was born in 1851, but he died after 4 months. Rani Lakshmi Bai is one of the major warrior who participated in the Great Revolt of 1857. One of the major cause was the doctrine of lapse, and she was affected by doctrine of lapse and she participated in the Great Revolt of 1857. Adopted son Gangadhar Rao died in 1853. Before his death, he adopted his cousin son Anand Rao, who was renamed Damodar Rao. So the British East India Company refused to accept their son as the legal heir because there was this rule, only biological son would be accepted as legal heir. Doctrine of lapse and annexed Jhansi by Dalhousie in 1853. So revolt of 1857, it broke out in Meerut and the Rani was ruling over Jhansi as a region for her minor son. So that is when she participated in the Great Revolt of 1857. Along with Tantia Tope and other rebel soldiers, Rani captured the fort of Gwalior, but she dies while fighting in Gwalior on 18th June of 1858. The Indian National Army started its first female unit in 1943 and named it after Rani Lakshmi Bai. So this is a very important question. 1943 and named after Jhansi Rani. What is doctrine of lapse? It was formulated in 1847 by Lord Dalhousie, Governor General of India, 1848 to 56. So after this, after the revolt of 1857, it was called as Viceroy. So this you can keep it in the mind. So according to Hindu law, an individual or a ruler without natural heirs, the biological heirs, could adopt a person who would then have all the personal and political rights of a son. That is, the inheritance and succession would go to the son, the adopted son. But doctrine of lapse states that if any Indian princely state has no male heir or a dispute over succession, the British would take control of it. So that is the doctrine of lapse. The British as supreme authority, they claimed the right to approve or reject adopted heirs of Indian rulers, and they justified in name of this particular policy. So what are the princely states annexed under doctrine of lapse? Satara, Jaipur and Sambalpur, Bahat, Udaipur, Jhansi and Nagpur. Next is Pencil online portal, platform for effective enforcement for no child labour. That is what is the Pencil stands for. It is launched by the Ministry of Labour and Employment. See this, not Women and Child Development, not Higher Education or Education, It is the Ministry of Labour and Employment. It focuses on all child workers below the age of 14 years in the identified target area. Adolescent workers below age of 18 years in the target area engaged in hazardous occupation and process, families of child workers in identified target area, etc. So we have fundamental rights involved in this. Article 21A states, the child should be sent to school, not to work. Then again Article 24 prohibits employing children in terms of work, specifically hazardous works. So these two fundamental rights, you should keep it in mind when you come across this particular portal. We'll discuss a prelims question based on this. The strategic significance of doctrine of lapse for the British lay mainly in weakening the Maratha Confederacy by blocking diplomatic alliances through adoption, preventing Indian princes from raising independent army after succession disputes, expanding direct British territorial control by invalidating traditional succession customs, enforcing British judicial authority over all matters of inheritance in the princely states. So the answer is expanding direct British territorial control by invalidating traditional succession. So this independent army is doctrine of subsidiary alliances. So B will not come as the answer. C would be the right answer for this question. We have successfully completed the discussion of today's current affairs. Do not forget to subscribe to this channel so that you don't miss any current affairs relevant to UPSC examination. And also like this video, comment if you have any doubts, and share this video to your friends.